Today I'm going to be reviewing another game in the Oniverse series. It's a series of small card games. It started with Onira from Z-Man Games, and then it was followed up by Urbion. And now the game I'm going to be looking at today is called Sylvion. All three of these games are small card games from the same designer, and they're intended primarily to be played as solo games. They all contain rules to play with two players, but really they're designed to be solo games. So I'm going to look at Sylvion. I'm going to show you a little bit of the components, give you an overview of how the game works, and then I'll come back with some closing comments. Alright, so the first thing I want to show you is the box itself, the packaging. You open this up and you have a pretty interesting little effect here. It's almost like reminds me of like a pop-up book. You have these different panels that fold out. You have some fire, some more fire, and then we have this one that comes down. And here you can see is the rule book, and underneath that are the components of the game. 2 stacks of cards and this little Ravage token. And all fits very nicely in this box. It's really a very beautiful package. One of the things that I really like about this game is the artwork, so I just want to show you some of the cards that are in it. These are some of the enemies. We have these fiery elemental guys. There's some support cards in the enemies deck. Different ones. It all has this really neat, like hand-drawn artwork. It almost looks a bit childish, but it's very charming. It's the same sort of artwork that's in the other games in this series. And I'm not going to explain what all these different cards do in this review, but I just want to give you a little bit of an idea of what the game looks like. Those are some of the enemy cards. And then some of the cards that are going to be in your deck are these. Some crazy looking squirrels. Plant. Ow. Alright, so hopefully that gives you some idea of the art's work and the just the style and the atmosphere of the game. Alright, so the game really includes rules for a basic game, then an advanced game, and then a couple of different expansions that you can add to the game. I'm going to show you how the base game works with some of the expansions, or rather I should say the advanced game. The basic game just takes out a lot of the cards. It's much simpler. It's basically a learning game, although I actually found it to be more challenging than the advanced game without the expansions. But anyhow, moving along to the advanced game, the first thing you do in the advanced game is what they call the Mobilization Phase. And this is where you're building your deck of defenders that you're going to use to defend the forest. And how that works is you have a stack of 12 what they call edge cards. These are going to be used for another purpose in the main part of the game, but during Mobilization Phase, you just shuffle these up, put them in a stack. You take all the possible cards that could go into your defender's deck, you shuffle them up and create a stack over here. And then what you do is you play through this Mobilization Phase where you take 4 cards and you put them out like so. Alright, and then you choose one of these 4 cards to go into your deck. So I'm going to grab this elephant card, and I'm going to put that's going to go in my deck. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring out 4 more cards, and these are going to form columns like this. So the one card where I already took a column from, it's only 1 card, but now you can see that these are starting to add up and you're getting some columns here. Now you take one of these edge cards and you flip it over, and the edge card has a number up here, 1 through 4, and that tells you which column you're going to discard. So that's a 1. I'm going to discard that column. Those cards, I just throw them back in the box. They're going out of the game. Then I go back and I bring out 4 more cards, building these columns farther. Okay, and I'm going to pick one to take, and I'm going to go ahead and take this column. That one goes in my deck. Let me do this again, bring out some more cards. Flip over one of these. This time it's number 2, so that one leaves the game. Bring out some more. Alright, now these 2 columns already have 4 cards in each, so you don't ever add any more. It never goes above 4. So now I would choose a column to take. I'll take this one, so I get all these cards. They go in my deck. And we go on a little bit further. Okay, number 1. That one gets to go away. Bring out some more. Alright, this time I'm going to take these 3. And bring out some more. Let's see. That's number 3. So that column just went away. And you keep doing that. Basically, bring out cards, take a column, bring out cards, get rid of a column, bring out cards, take a column, bring out cards, get rid of a column, like that, until either all these are exhausted or all of these are exhausted, in which case any cards left on the table, and if it's because these were exhausted, any cards left in here, go out of the game, and you just keep whatever cards you had already claimed for your deck. That's the mobilization phase. So when you've set the whole game up, it'll look something like this. As you can see, it's a bit, takes up quite a bit of space on the table. This isn't a game with a small footprint. And one of the things I have to say is that it actually takes you a while to get to this point. Between that mobilization phase that I just showed you, and then shuffling the enemy deck, dividing up into 4 stacks, and setting this whole thing up, it actually takes quite a while to set up this game. It's one of the things I'm not too thrilled about with the game. But what we have over here is these edge cards that we were using earlier during the mobilization phase. They all start with the bloom side face up. This is the desolation side here, which starts down. We have our deck over here. We have our starting hand of 8 cards. And then we have the stacks of enemy cards. We have these blazing elementals over here. These are all identical. On one side they have a strength of 3. On the other side they have a strength of 4. These ones are 2s on one side and 4s on the other. And we keep our Ravage token nearby. The first thing you do on each round is you reveal 1 card from the top of each of these stacks. And it doesn't go anywhere, it doesn't move yet, it just gets flipped over so you can see what card is on the top of each stack. Now, all of these are elemental cards. You can see they're all basically just bad guys of varying strengths. So we have a 3, a 2, a 1, and a 0. Now, 2 of these cards have the Ravage icon under their strength. That means when this card appears, you're going to put the Ravage token on it. There were 2 of them, so in this case it goes on the one with the higher strength. So after those have been revealed, the next thing that happens is you advance all the elemental cards. So we're going to move all of these elemental cards forward 1 space, like so. Now, over the course of the game, they're going to continue moving this way, and if they ever reach your forest over here, you have to start flipping some of these edge cards to their desolated side. And how many you flip depends on the strength. So this one would actually do nothing to you if it gets over there. This one would cause you to flip 1, 2, and 3. So that's what happens. If over the course of the game you end up flipping all your edge cards to the desolated side, and then you take more damage, so you have to flip another, then you lose the game. That's how you lose. How you win is basically surviving all of these cards and having all your edge cards bloom side up at the end of the game. Now, after you've revealed cards, you've moved cards, now you're going to play some cards from your hand. And this is honestly not a typical starting hand. I put in here basically all the a bunch of the special cards, just so you could see what they do. Now, as you can see, each of these cards has like a water droplet in the top left corner, and that water droplet contains a number. That's the cost of the card, and you pay the cost of a card by discarding that many cards from your hand. So I could play, for example, this fountain card, which costs 2, by discarding maybe these 2 cards from my hand. So I discard them over here next to my draw pile, and I could play this fountain card right here. Alright, now what that's going to do is on the next turn, on the next round when this card moves forward, there's going to be a fight between this fire elemental and this fountain, and you compare the strength of the elemental to the strength of the fountain, and the weaker card is destroyed. So this would move up and be destroyed. In the case of a tie, both cards are destroyed. Anytime a fountain is destroyed, you immediately get to draw another card from your deck. So that's one of the perks to having your fountain destroyed, if that happens. If this card were, say, had a strength of 4 and it moved into here, it would just destroy the fountain and keep moving. It wouldn't be destroyed as well. Up here, if I were to play it up here, then on the next round this card would move forward. It has a strength of 3. This one has a strength of 3. They would destroy each other, but what this token does is anytime this card would be destroyed, you remove the token, put it back over there, and the card stays. So in this case, if these two ended up having combat, the fountain would be destroyed and the token would be removed, but this guy would stay here, working his way towards the forest. But that's how those work. That's basically how fountains work. Fountains are your main defense against the enemies. Now, the other cards in here are special cards. This is an elephant. He costs 1, and he lets you destroy any elemental. Doesn't matter the cost, so I could just play that card to get rid of this guy if I wanted, and this card would just be discarded, along with whatever card I used to play its cost. This card lets you move an elemental up to 3 spaces. So, for example, if I had this guy here, I could go ahead and play this card to move this guy 1, 2, and he would get destroyed by that fountain. And then the fountain would be sitting there to take out that guy when he moves. That's the use of that card. This card has a cost of 0, these hedgehogs, and what they do is as soon as you have revealed the cards on the top of here on the next at the beginning of a round, you can play a hedgehog to discard any one of those cards without activating it in any way. So that's a pretty useful ability. You can't use it to get rid of cards that have already moved into the field, but any card on the top of one of these stacks you can get rid of once it's been revealed. This card here, these squirrels, they let you look at the top 2 cards of each stack and then put those 2 cards back in any order. Kind of lets you control which cards are going to come out on the next round a little bit. This card, the owl, lets you draw 3 cards, so lets you get some more options in your hand for what to play. This card over here, the doves, costs 1. It lets you simply discard the top card of each stack. It works really nicely with the squirrels in that you can, if you have both of them in your hand, you can look at the top 2, arrange them, and then use the doves to get rid of whichever cards were going to cause you the most trouble. So that's a pretty nice combo there. This card, the stag, it lets you do one of 2 things. First, let me show you one other common type of card. This type of card is a tree. The trees always have this little icon on the bottom with a number. So if you pay the cost to put a tree out, and put it there, for example, at the end of the game, I'll be able to turn 4 of these edge cards bloom side up. So if at the end of the game I've lost some of these because enemies have made their way across, and if this card is on the table, I'd get to turn 4 of them bloom side up. So that's good. Now what the stag does is he either lets you turn 2 of them bloom side up at any point. You just play this, It has a cost of 0, and you can turn 2 of these bloom side up. Or you can turn one of them bloom side up for each tree that you have on the field. So another useful card. There's a couple of other special cards that are going to be in your deck, possibly depending on what cards you got during the mobilization phase. But those are just some of the most important ones. Now, after you have revealed a card, you've moved all those cards, then you draw 3 cards. So let's say we got that one. Okay, this is a card that might end up in your deck. It's actually Betrayer. And when you draw this, you either immediately discard it, or you take it and one other card of your choice, and you remove them from the game completely. So you'll never have to worry about drawing that again, but you lost one of your other cards. Now, that isn't always a bad thing, because sometimes you can use that to make your deck smaller, which means that you'll get to the cards that you want more often. So, not always a bad thing, but sometimes it can be a real bummer when you're hoping to draw a certain card and you're drawing, your 3 cards for the turn, and this is one of them. That's just one less chance to draw something that's really going to help you. So you're going to draw some cards, you're going to play some cards, maybe put out some trees, put out some fountains, maybe play some of these special cards for their effects, and then it's going to move to the next round. So on the next round, we're going to flip over another card from each of these. And these are all cards that have special effects. So this one turns all of your elementals that are in play into blazing elementals, and that's what these are for. And it always goes up in power by 1, except in the case of a 0. So this 3 would get discarded, and you would replace it with a 4. And you can see that has a strength of 4, and this always carries over. When that happens, it gets put on the new card. This would get discarded, and you put a 3 out there. And then the 0s are unique in that they get discarded and replaced by a 4, rather than just going up by 1. So this one would also be replaced by a 2. So now all of those are a lot more dangerous. And this card, after you've resolved it, would get discarded. This card makes it so all your elementals that are currently in play just move up 1. So now they're going to move up more, perhaps, than what you were expecting in the round. This one forces you to make a choice. You can either discard 1 card at random from your hand, or you can discard 2 cards of your choice. This one has you either remove 1 card from your discard pile at random, it just goes out of the game completely, or you can do 2 cards of your choice. This effect also happens when your deck is depleted. When you have no cards left in your deck, they're all in your discard pile, and you need to draw more cards. You're going to shuffle these and then draw from your replenished draw pile. But before you do that, you have to make a decision to remove 2 of these cards from the game, or after you shuffle, you remove 1 at random. And like I said, you're going to keep doing that until these decks are depleted. When the last card is revealed, you have from each of these decks, you have the final round. What that means is you reveal, you resolve any of those special cards, you move the elementals forward, then you get to draw your 3 cards and then play cards, and then any elementals that are still on the board are just going to move as far as they can to the left until they hit the edge, or until they hit a fountain or something else that stops them. And then, of course, if they hit the edge, that's going to cause some of these edge cards to flip over. And then you're going to flip some back if you have some tree cards out on the table. And then if you have all of your edge cards bloom side up, you win the game. Otherwise, you lose. Also, if this card that's carrying this token ever makes it all the way to the end, you lose automatically, regardless of the state of the edge cards. So hopefully that gave you a general overview of the game, helped you understand how it works, shows you a little bit of the components without getting bogged down with too many details. For my closing thoughts, what I really think about the game, I'm going to start with the things that I don't really care for. The first thing is the setup. It really seems to take a long time to set up this game for what it is. It's not exceptionally long as far as board games or card games go, but for what it is, being a small solo game, it just feels like it takes a long time to get into it. That whole first phase with the mobilization, where you're building your deck of defenders, that's interesting. I like the mechanics of that, but it just seems a little out of place for this game. It feels like something that should be in maybe a slightly deeper, more complex game. Whereas with this game, the game itself is very simple. That just seems like an odd first step that really becomes like almost, it's not quite a first half of the game, maybe more like the first quarter to fifth of the game. But it just feels, I don't know, it's like it's a little too much for what the game really is. I'd much rather be able to get into the game more quickly. Perhaps a mechanic where you do build your deck of defenders at the beginning, but you build it by grabbing maybe some tree cards and some fountain cards, and then throwing in a dozen of the animal cards of your choice, the cards with the special abilities. Something like that I think would be more appealing to me. Also, the iconography of the game, none of the cards have any text on them. They all have some iconography to let you know what they do. And for the most part, that's pretty intuitive, but there are some cards that the iconography is just a little bit confusing. You really have to look in the rulebook to understand what the card does. And then I found that the first few times I played the game, I had to keep referencing the rulebook to remind myself what these cards did, because it just wasn't intuitive enough. And then I put the game away for a while. When I came back to it a few months later, again, the first couple of times I played it, I had to keep going back to the rulebook to remind myself. So I wish the iconography was just a little more intuitive, or they could have actually just put a little bit of text on the cards in place of the icons to let you know what the card does. So I feel like that's a minor problem, not a big problem, but a minor problem. And then overall, I was a little disappointed with how easy the game is, really. When you play the basic game without all the cards, it's pretty challenging. But then as soon as you play the so-called advanced game, which is really how you should play it all the time, then it becomes really easy until you put in the Ravage token. Once you put the Ravage token in, it becomes challenging again. But up to that point, even the other two expansions don't really make it any more challenging. They make it a little more interesting, but not really more challenging. So overall, I would say the game is fairly easy until you put that Ravage token in. That makes it a little more challenging. But the things that I do like about the game, I really like the artwork. As with all the other games in the series, the artwork has a really neat style. It's almost childish and kind of whimsical, but just really charming. Really conveys the idea of this strange dreamland where these games are supposed to be taking place. And I like the fact that it's a solo game. I just can't seem to find the opportunities to play games with friends as often as I would like to play games, period. And so a solo game like that, which is relatively inexpensive, it's relatively small, so it's not too hard to take with you. For that reason, I like it a lot. I like having some small solo games that I can play like that. Now, there is kind of a mixed thing with the spatial element of the game, how you kind of set up that grid, and then you have the cards moving across the grid. I think that's neat. I think it's neat to have a card game with that spatial element, but again, it makes it so the footprint of the game is rather large. Makes it so you can't set it up just anywhere. You pretty much have to have some kind of card table or dining room table or something like that to play it on. And then again, it not as easy to take around with you, as opposed to the other two earlier games in the series, which are very small, very portable. You can set them up in a relatively small space and enjoy them pretty much anywhere. So overall, I would say it's a pretty decent game. I don't like it as well as Onirim or Urbion, so if you haven't played any games in this series, I would recommend starting with one of those. I think those are better games. But if you've already played both of those and you're looking for something that's kind of in a similar vein but a little bit different, check out Sylvion because it is a decent game. I don't think it's as good as those two games, but if you've already played those two games and are looking for something different, it's a good follow-up to that.